Alright guys, welcome back to Project 3550. This is episode number 2. Started this prep early July. I was 205, and by the time we get to next July of 2021, that's when I plan to be, basically stage ready. And we're looking to, take 35 pounds off. So it's a decent amount of weight to take off. I mean, if we look at, kind of general guidelines, hey, we can probably, take off a pound a week, giving myself even more time than that to take this weight off. And the reason I'm doing that, we're not robots, we're humans, and we have to take into account some factors such as plateaus that that might come about, and sometimes those plateaus they're not rectified immediately. Sometimes it takes a week, maybe 2 weeks, sometimes even up to a month to kind of figure out hey, how can I get this progress moving again? And also take into account the real world stuff as far as holidays and birthdays, anniversaries, and for me personally, I love to try to keep a balanced family life. So spending time with my kids, and also trying to have like date nights with my wife. To me, that's super important to have these things still going while you're prepping. And of course, as a bodybuilder, it's super important, that, we maximize our progress. Of course, we all want to be as jacked and shredded as humanly possible. And I know we've all heard, you got to be hardcore, you got to sacrifice to win and all that. But I've been that bodybuilder, I've been that bodybuilder in my 20s, in my 30s. And, I was successful with that type of approach, more robotic, doing things according to, specific guidelines, being, just super hardcore and on point, trying to quote unquote be optimal. But what it ended up happening is, once the season's over with, I may have been quote unquote optimal with my bodybuilding, but I wasn't optimal with how I was balancing bodybuilding and life. So I sacrificed in a sense to win, but I also sacrificed in a sense that now, after the prep is over, I have to do a lot of cleanup. I have to, basically put some things back together that were neglected, as far as the life stuff. And, that stress, is not really fun to deal with. Those people or those hardcore bodybuilders that say, hey, you got to sacrifice to win. Sometimes, you just have to put, your loved ones on the back burner. You got to put, work and all that. You just kind of have to put it aside at times in order to maximize yourself. To me, it's like, hey, if you can put energy into maximizing and being hardcore like that, then you can definitely put energy in trying to be more balanced. Like that, to me, can be a skill, is a skill that you should say that you can get better at. So that's what I want to do with this prep. You can kind of see that early on in this prep, my rate of loss is about a pound a week. So in a sense, we're looking at about 0.5% of my body weight a week. So nothing that's overly invasive, definitely not aggressive. And what I've learned, over the years is that you definitely don't want to, let's say, go aggressive. Like you can definitely go a little more aggressive earlier on because, when I'm sitting at 35 pounds over stage weight when I started, there's plenty of energy on my body. So even if I was to go 1% of my body weight per week, like let's say losing 2 pounds early on, yeah, it's a little more assertive, but it's not going to be where you're at risk for muscle loss just because, again, there's an abundance amount of body fat on me right now. So again, there's plenty of energy there. But I also know myself pretty well. So, in order to kind of account for all those things I mentioned earlier about balancing out life and all that, I know a little bit of a slower start makes a little more sense for me because I kind of treat bodybuilding like a dimmer switch. When you need to turn it up, you turn it up, right? You turn that switch all the way up. When you turn it down, you turn it all the way down, or you can go anywhere in between. So coming off of the off season, my dimmer switch was pretty low. So I don't want to just go, hey, let's crank that thing all the way up. Because when you do that, that's a huge shift in your daily flow, like how you do things, your behaviors. So it's hard to go from one extreme as far as behaviors. Now all of a sudden you're going to the other side of the spectrum and it gets extreme on the other side. So I need time personally to kind of just slowly turn that dimmer switch up. So that's why, my rate of loss, I don't really speed it up too quickly early on, because it's just going to basically, that means I have to like have that hard shift in behaviors, and that creates a little bit more stress than I'm willing to take on. So I like to kind of just baby myself through the process. So over the first 2-3 weeks, I start to get my flow going a little bit better. We're looking at 1 refeed a week for the first couple months, and basically after that, it might start to look like 1 to 2 refeeds a week. And how I gauge whether I'm doing 1 or 2 refeeds a week is, where's my rate of loss at? If I'm getting that 1 pound a week, and I'm feeling okay, I'm feeling good, not really fatigued, I don't look, let's say, overly flat or anything like that, then I can, opt for 1 refeed a week. If there's something social though, and I need it, like, hey, there's some function going on and need to have a little bit of wiggle room, maybe 150 grams of carbs for 2 days a week, then I'll do it, just because, it gives me a little bit more flexibility to ensure that life quality remains high. If, let's say, I'm not getting that pound a week, then of course, I'm going to basically keep it down to 1 refeed a week. And if I'm doing more than a pound a week, like if I'm losing more than that, no doubt, I can definitely get away with, taking 2 refeeds a week. So if I take 2 refeeds a week, it's just going to set the next week up really well. Get some glycogen back in me. Energy is going to pick up. I'm probably going to be a happier human. I'll probably have more energy. My wife and kids will probably love me a little more because of it. And my training will no doubt love me more, the next day or two I get back in the gym. So you definitely want to, keep your performance as high as you could possibly keep it, because if you're training well, then the likelihood of you holding on to muscle mass is that much better. So it's super, super important that, again, I'm balancing out that supply and demand. Starting at 205, then going into, let's say, the 190s, it may not feel as bad, because, I still have decent amount of body fat. So the rate of loss can kind of stay at 1 pound a week. But once we start getting into, the 180s, I'm probably going to pull back a little bit, more like a 3/4 of a pound a week. Then once I get down into the 170s, then we're looking at like half a pound a week. So really kind of slowing that pace down. That means more than likely, instead of having, let's say, 1 to 2 refeeds a week, now we're looking at 2 to 3 refeeds a week, again, to keep me afloat, keep those energy levels going, make sure that my physique isn't getting run down, doesn't look flat and depleted, more than not. So I really want to balance everything out, make sure I'm training well still, recovering well. Again, when I get into the 170s, we're slowing that pace down to half a pound a week. And the diet breaks, probably come a little bit sooner at that point. So instead of like every 12 weeks, now we're looking at, every 8 weeks, again, with 2 to 3 refeeds, per week. So plenty of days where I'm recharging the batteries there. My approach is to try to keep food level as high as I can keep it with this prep. That wasn't always the case in 2019. 2019, I had to do a combination of getting the calories kind of, down quite a bit and getting my step count up a decent amount. So kind of both, like dropping food and increasing activity. This time around, I really want to try to avoid dropping the food, at least early on, because the last prep, I think I just got a little too aggressive with food cuts. I wasn't probably as patient as I should have been. So I think I was just kind of chopping food, not seeing what I want, let's see, with the scale. And I was like, oh, okay, I probably need to lower food down here. I could probably tolerate it. So let's go ahead and push it. So I probably got a little bit anxious. And even for me to say that is kind of crazy because I'm pretty patient. But this time around, I'm trying to be super patient. I want to see if I can basically lose as much as I can with higher calories, with that 6,000 to 8,000 step count. Once we start to slow down a bit, like if I'm starting to lose under that under the pound a week right now, then I'm probably just going to target activity, like increasing steps, maybe doing more things around the house, more house projects and things like that. I want to basically try to keep the food level high. The reason I want to do that is I want to make sure that, when I get into the gym, like I have that, let's say 350 to 400 grams of carbs, it's there, right? I can train with that. Like training at 350 to 400 carbs versus, let's say, 200 to 250, which was kind of the average for my last prep. I mean, that's a huge difference in carbohydrate. So you can imagine, the energy level while training with a bit more carbs in me. Also, the fullness factor as far as my physique, not looking, let's say, as depleted. Of course, there's going to be flatness when it comes to contest prep, but if you're chronically flat, it's not very fun. It's not very confident either. Like looking at yourself in the mirror, you're like, fuck, I'm flat. It's like constantly seeing flatness, and that's not exciting to me when I'm going through a year-long process. So I'm just running a little bit of trial and error on myself to see if I can lean more towards activity with this prep to kind of facilitate fat loss versus relying more on cuts in food. Of course, if it gets to a point where activity level is just getting way too amplified, because that can create issues, because that saying, if you do a little too much of something, it can be counterproductive. So if that activity level does get elevated, let's say my step count's getting really, really exasperated, that can cause repetitive use injury. That I experienced last prep, walking too much. I had tibialis tendonitis, pretty severe, so I had to basically kind of stop walking, go to a recumbent bike. So what I learned from that is this prep, if I do have to elevate activity quite a bit, then I need to alternate between, let's say, walking and doing recumbent bike, whether it's like, hey, every other day, or a week of walking and maybe a week of recumbent, or however I'm going to do it. I just want to make sure that I'm not doing the same motions over and over and over again, because that can kind of, catch up to you and bite you in the ass like it did me. So I don't want that to happen again. I don't want to repeat history. And that's what's really great about trial and error. When you go through something, you try it, you kind of get your own answers. So I really love to run my own trial and error and see what I get. And that's basically what this prep is all about, is like, so let's see if we can get shredded with more food, and I'll have to increase activity up a bit, but do it in a way where, again, not disturb my weight training. That's one thing I got to keep an eye on too, is that you elevate the activity level, that means the demand goes up. So if let's say my walking, or I'm doing more cardio, gets really elevated, and we start, let's say, getting way ahead of the weight training, like doing way more than the weight training, I'm not hesitant about, hey, let's incorporate some extra rest days, like not as many training days. Like, hey, instead of training each body part twice a week, maybe it's twice every 8 or 9 days, or even 10 days, because I know just stretching that out is not going to cause atrophy, because I'm still training. It takes, stop training for about 3 to 4 or 5 weeks, stop training altogether, then you'll know what atrophy is like. But just pacing it out a little bit. So again, balancing out that supply and demand. Like if I need to get more fat loss, I need to get more active. Okay, let me just nudge the weight training down just a little bit, in order to keep that supply and demand pretty even keeled. So I'm not saying this is exactly how it's going to unfold, but I'm just kind of talking theory here. These are some of the things I might be doing as we move forward. And, as I start to make adjustments, I'll keep you guys informed with future episodes. So this is super, super important as far as the day-to-day stuff, because in my opinion, I think oftentimes we look at the science. The science is important, don't get me wrong. But what's even more important in my mind anyways, is that how you go about your daily flow. In a sense, your bodybuilding, like life should come first, right? So you want to set your daily flow, your daily life schedule with something that you can execute extremely well. It doesn't take a lot of energy, doesn't take a lot of effort. And if that's the case, it's not going to create a lot of stress. If you're following something that has a lot of rules and it's making your life very stressful, that's not something that's going to be very sustainable. and you're not going to enjoy it. So again, I got a year-long process ahead of me. No way I want to be miserable every day. So my daily flow, it's basically based off of my life schedule, how I'm going to be able to execute extremely well with low stress, and so I can enjoy it. An easy way to structure the day with meals, like, okay, 40 grams of protein every meal, 10 to 12 fat every meal, and then again the carbs are just a little bit different but not a whole lot, so things are very balanced. It's going to help with my energy supplies throughout the day. I try not to kind of get wacky with my food, like, oh, okay, let me eat, let's barely eat in the morning or afternoon because I'm saving up for all these calories for the evening so I can have this giant bowl of ice cream or something like that. Like, I don't do that because training's going to suffer because there's no energy throughout the day because you're not eating that much. And things like that. Like, I want to make sure I have a sharp mind for my athletes while I'm working. So I want to make sure that, I'm eating, pretty balanced throughout the day. And that's going to help with satiety as well, especially deeper into prep. When you start doing some wacky things, it's not very conducive towards satiety and energy levels, performance, recovery. So even though I consider myself very flexible, like I talked about early on, hey, I want to be balanced with this bodybuilding thing in life. But I am very mindful of making sure that I take care of my athletic needs. That's a priority, like making sure I'm performing well and recovering well and making sure my mind is there when I'm working with my athletes, because obviously, my job is super, super important as well. So that's kind of the meal structure and the daily flow and all that. So I know this is pretty lengthy. I'm going to leave it here. I think the next episode I might get into some training, but hopefully you guys found this pretty enjoyable. Hopefully you guys got something out of it, like you're learning a thing or two. And again, as always, if you guys have questions, feel free to drop them down below. I will do my best to get to them. Of course, be super patient. But other than that, have a great week, and hopefully we see you guys next week.
Oh my god.